we have an individual in the UK who has been persecuted probably for 20 years now, who's been demonized, who's the boogeyman.
This guy has done more than any of the mainstream media and any politician to expose the issue of grooming gangs. And
Psychologically, it breaks people. That's why we send them to solitary confinement. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's returning guest, good friend of mine, that Preston journalist. How you doing, Ash?
Yeah, very good, Nick. Thanks.
Let's jump into this. So we have an individual in the UK who has been persecuted probably for 20 years now, who's been demonized, who's the boogeyman that the establishment always points to and go, we need to be careful of people like him. We need to be careful of people who like him. They're Nazis, they're fascists, they're going to destroy us all, they're evil. And that person is Tommy Robinson, who sits in jail at the moment in solitary confinement, who I believe isn't well at all. He's been in the news recently, last couple of days. What's going on there?
Yeah, so of course Tommy tried to appeal the court ruling and tried to get out a bit earlier because after all, he's a civil prisoner. He's not, until Lord Hermer. I hate calling him Lord, but Starmer's mate, the Attorney General, intervened and then almost turned it into a criminal prosecution when it was contempt of court. Most people don't even go to prison for that. They get a fine. You might get some community service, a slap on the wrist. But of course, because it's Tommy Robinson, they gave him 18 months, eligible for parole in 9. Which at the time I actually said was quite a touch. Actually, I think he got off quite lightly. The establishment could have done a lot worse to him. However, of course, since then he's been spending the entire time in solitary confinement. And whilst I'm someone that quite likes my own company and being on my own with a good book or something, try doing at minimum 9 months of it on your own with no one to see. They've taken away certain channels he can watch on TV. They've stopped him having phone calls with his kids or his ex-wife, or his family. Imagine what that does to you. They've cancelled visits repeatedly. Anybody that goes to see him has to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, just to go and see him in prison. And this is all because, of course, he's just uncomfortable for the establishment. I've always said this on videos I've made. You don't have to like the guy. I'm not asking you to go out there, and wave, I heart Tommy banners and stuff. But, I've never voted. I didn't vote for him when he stood to be an MEP. I've never voted UKIP, for example, stuff like that. But it's not the point. This guy has done more than any of the mainstream media and any politician to expose the issue of grooming gangs. And if it wasn't for Tommy Robinson, I don't think the issue of grooming gangs would even be on the front pages now. It was because of him exposing what was going on. Has he always gone about it in the right way? No. Has he? I went to one of these EDL marches once. I've never seen a bigger bunch of scumbags, if I'm completely honest with you. But, nevertheless, it was one way to get the media's attention. And since those days, I know he finds it hard to get the EDL off his back, doesn't he? But since those days, he's changed his approach. He's now a citizen journalist. Anybody can do that. You don't need qualifications. And he actually makes quite interesting programs. And I watched those entire court proceedings the other day. I only switched on for 10 minutes. I ended up watching the entire thing. It was quite interesting. And the arguments made by his lawyer were compelling, and the arguments made by the Crown simply weren't. They made out he was living this life of luxury, this wonderful life inside prison, completely ignoring the fact that he's wasting away. If you listen to people that know him, the Howard Coxes of this world, for example, even Maya Tuzi, a YouTuber, they've all been to see him, and they said he's wasting away slowly. You can see it. He puts a brave face on it, keeps a stiff upper lip, if you will, but he's losing a lot of weight. His mental health isn't right. And they're just leaving him to rot in solitary confinement. And they think by giving him a painting and decorating job for about 2 hours a week, he's going to solve all his problems.
Yeah, I mean, first things first is this. When you've got the biggest, toughest criminals in jail, in any jail across the world, and they need punishing, what is normally the punishment for those individuals? It's solitary confinement. Because we all know psychologically it breaks people. That's why we send them to solitary confinement. It's a punishment. So he's being punished while he's in jail because he's Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is a very flawed individual. He's by far he's not perfect. He's made loads of mistakes, but that's not the issue here. The issue here is if the state can persecute Tommy Robinson, that means they can persecute you for when you cross the line, for when you go too far. Just like that Tory councillor's wife who's doing 3 years in jail for sending a tweet that she then deleted. She can't, she's been denied early release or visiting rights for husband who's sick and see her kids. If they can persecute these people, it means they can persecute you. Now, for anyone who doesn't like Tommy Robinson, you need to think, why do I not like him? What is it about him I don't like? And what I would recommend you do is go on YouTube and find his 1 hour speech at the Oxford Union, where he sat in a chair speaking and taking questions from the audience for an hour. When I watched that, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, that was when I changed my opinion on Tommy Robinson. When I heard him speak, when I heard his life story, when he talked about what he's trying to do. Watch that. And then if you still don't like the man, absolutely fine. At least then you've got all the information. But he's being persecuted by the state, just like many other people are. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in jail. Dr. Martin Luther King, assassinated. Gandhi, assassinated. I'm not saying for one moment that Tommy Robinson is Mandela, is Gandhi, or Dr. King. I'm just saying when the state doesn't want you around anymore, they lock you up or you've assassinated. And he's kept the grooming gang scandal in the public eye. He didn't discover it. He didn't uncover it. Other people did that, but he kept it alive. He did in documentaries. He did, interviews outside courts, got himself into trouble. He kept it alive. And for that, he's seen as a folk hero. On many demonstrations I go to about child sex exploitation and the grooming gangs, I'm always a guest speaker. And everybody there loves Tommy Robinson. He's become a folk hero. And the government and the elite can't have him as a folk hero. He must be destroyed.
Yeah, and it's pathetic, isn't it? They're scared to death of him. You're right. He has become something of a hero. And you ask the majority of people, oh, why don't you like Tommy Robinson? And they'll say, oh, he's a racist. And then you just say to him, right, go and point to me one thing that he said that's racist. If there's one thing he knows about, it is actually religions. He's read all these different religious texts and stuff. And if you listen to the guy, he's very articulate. He knows his brief. He knows what he's talking about. I wouldn't like to debate him because he knows far more than I do about these topics. And, why is it that people like Matt Goodwin, for example, or Douglas Murray's rhetoric is probably even more right-wing than Tommy Robinson's is? Why is it okay for Douglas Murray to do it? Because he's got a nice accent. He's got a very posh, well-spoken accent, and it's very acceptable. Matt Goodwin, university professor, of course he can say whatever he wants. But Tommy Robinson, just a normal working-class guy with a southern accent from Luton, well, I'm afraid that's unacceptable. You don't fit in with the establishment. And all right, people like Matt Goodwin and especially Douglas Murray might be outliers, but they still get on mainstream media channels. They still get their books published. If Tommy Robinson released a book, for all I know, he might have done, but I bet you no publisher would touch it. No mainstream publisher would touch it. The BBC wouldn't have Tommy Robinson on to debate religion with some extremist from Islam or something like that, would they? The last channel that had him on, I think, was when Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid had him on. And to be honest with you, he ripped Piers Morgan a new one, and all they kept trying to do was interrupt him. But one thing he isn't is he's not stupid. And, again, whatever you think of him, I hope that he gets through this prison sentence all right. Because he said that he's got a lot to expose that when he gets out about the current people in power and other things, which is something I wouldn't have said if I was him, actually. I'd have just kept my gob shut until I got out of prison. But you're right. These people now that laugh at him and say, oh, you're let him rot, let him die, and, throw away the key, whatever, and stuff like that. You want to be very, very careful because next time they go out and say something extreme, they could be the ones getting locked up in a cell for God knows how long. These Just Stop Oil people did it for long enough, and now some of them are serving 5 years. So you just got to show everything comes to an end.
It does. Two things from me. The first thing is you hit upon it then. His accent. Tommy Robinson suffers from something called classism because he's got a common accent like me, not posh like you, but he's got a common accent like me. Um, he's looked down upon because of that. Everything he says, Douglas Murray says exactly the same thing, and Douglas Murray is seen as an academic, is seen as a posh boy, and he gets a lot of pushback. Douglas Murray, of course, he does, but he's seen as acceptable. Tommy Robinson, with his accents and with some of his convictions previously, is seen as beyond the pale. That's why they will never accept him. I wrote an article last month about Tommy Robinson. It was about the death of Tommy Robinson. And what I was saying was, if he dies in prison, there'll be hell to pay. There will be riots. There'll be conspiracy theories. The state's killed him, done this on purpose, and there'll be riots. He will die as a martyr, and that could be the end of the elite. If he's released, and when he's released, if he's ever murdered by an Islamist, the same thing will happen. There will be riots, there'll be violence. It could be the beginning of the civil war that I've been talking about now for several months. There's a lot on the shoulders of Tommy Robinson if he survives or doesn't survive, because he could be the spark that burns all this down if he's assassinated.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it? And God forbid, I obviously don't want it to happen, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he doesn't see this prison sentence out. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that he is fatally, tragically attacked on the street somewhere. And you're right, that could well be the spark. You're right about the civil war thing, by the way. I've heard you mention it before, and you're absolutely right. I've seen other people also talking about it now as well, and it's perfectly possible. One, I suppose, academic, you want to call him that, professor, said it's inevitable. Said there's no stopping it. It's going to happen. It's just when and what sets it off. And, the establishment can try and ignore the Tommy Robinsons of this world all they want. But part of it's jealousy, because none of them could ever galvanize the support that Tommy Robinson could. And part of it is fear, because they're going to lose the nice, cushy way of lives, living off the taxpayer for the rest of their lives, as they always have done. None of them have really had jobs. It's all about the public sector. It's all about maintaining the status quo, their own way of life. And that's why they hate Reform UK so much. That's what, they don't want any change. Even if it means having your opposition in there, having Labour have to have Tories in there. Lib Dems don't like anybody. Tories have to put up with Labour. But as we've said in the past, that's the game they play. They're happy to play their establishment game, lose a few seats here, gain a few there, etc. That's all good. But if somebody from the great unwashed, the plebs, comes along and tries to change something, then woe betide them, and they'll throw everything they can from the state at them. And you'll notice that people who are in the public eye, who commit heinous offences far worse than anything Tommy Robinson's ever done, never get punished, do they? It's only when it's absolutely, there's no other option, they start punishing people. I'm referring to people like Jimmy Savile. I'm referring to bloody Hugh Edwards, a paedophile that didn't even go to prison. Yet it seems they've got space for someone like Tommy Robinson, who has to be on a wing on his own, with something like 12 empty cells around him that could have at least 2 people inside them. They're willing to release thousands of prisoners, violent offenders, and many have already been recalled within hours of being released, for the sake of putting people in prison that said something silly, like as you just said about Lucy Conley. They're willing to put people like her in prison for 31 months, yet they'll let some rapist, some bank robber, just walk out of prison. The images of those people walking out of prison with bottles of champagne, getting picked up by Rolls Royces and things like that. I'm like, what kind of people are you releasing into society when you're putting a mother in prison for 31 months for a tweet? These people are pathetic, and they're scared, and they're right to be scared as well, because when sorry, let me finish this point. When whether it's Tommy Robinson or not, somebody, as you've rightly said in the past, is going to come along and are going to lead the British people, the indigenous population of this country, will take back control of this country. Is it Farage? Is it Tommy Robinson? I'm sceptical. Is it somebody else waiting in the wings that hasn't quite come to the fore yet? Is it Nick Tenkoni? You know, quite possibly. But it could be somebody we haven't even heard of yet. But somebody's going to fight the establishment. And if you can get someone to galvanize the population, that's when we'll start seeing some real change.
You said something then about being scared. The elite are scared. That's why they're punishing Tommy Robinson. That's why that other woman is in jail for a tweet. And they're letting murderers out and violent criminals out. It's because they're not, the elite are not scared of the violent criminals because they won't affect them. But people tweeting online and Tommy Robinson speaking out, that could galvanize people. That could lead to change in the country. That scares the elite. Now, we've put up with this for so long, and the government have got the playbook about how they deal with all this. But things are changing. We can put up with mass immigration and raping us and killing us and all that if our lives are still good and we're earning money and we've got good services and we've got plenty of money because we're selfish creatures. But we've got to a stage now where our lives aren't good. So the bad things are happening look even worse. And the reason why our lives are not as good as they used to be over the last decade is because our economy is failing for many reasons. So here's a segue into the next section here. Is our economy still failing? What's going on with the economy? It just seems doom and gloom all the time now with the economy under this chancellor.
Nothing's improved, put it that way. So inflation was at 2.6%. They're calling that a win because I think it was the OBR who predicted it, or it might have been the Bank of England, one of them anyway, predicted it was going to be at 2.7. And Reeves is trying to call that a win, 0.1%. She also came out and said that wages are rising faster than prices. Well, that's rubbish. I'm not even sure this woman understands what inflation actually means. And for anybody watching this, inflation means the amount that commodities that you might buy, that price is rising by. So it's at 2.6%. The price of your average, I don't know, a box of cereal is rising at 2.6%. All right, it's not coming down, it's still going up. The Bank of England's target is, of course, 2% because companies can afford to give people inflation matching pay rises and things like that. But the only reason she can say that wages have risen is because they ploughed tens of billions, or at least 14 billion, should I say, into public sector pay rises, which cost an absolute fortune. And then they can say, well, look at all them wages that have risen. People are actually better off now under us. No, they're not, because that money that they've then paid to the public sector has meant they've robbed the private sector, which is now laying people off and refusing to hire people because of national insurance contributions going up, etc. And it wouldn't even surprise me if some of that money for those pay rises was even borrowed as well. So then we're paying interest payments on that. So we're not better off at all. And if you look at GDP per capita, that's the wealth that per head in this country, that is going down. They can point to GDP and say, oh, it's gone up by 0.3% or something like that. Well, it's not, because people are getting poorer. And if you have got a GDP that is rising, albeit slowly, yet your GDP per capita is going down, that tells you something. There's a hell of a lot of money being sucked out somewhere. Is that scroungers on the dole? Is it the too many MPs and lords with the snouts in the trough? Is it illegal immigration, all the hotels, etc.? Because if you've got a GDP that's rising, then the people in your country should be getting richer. But we're not. We're getting poorer, and the GDP rose slightly. She is now the most unpopular politician in the UK. Even more unpopular, believe it or not, than Keir Starmer. And I mean, God, well, she's joined with Starmer, shall I say, minus 62%, sorry, against, which is unbelievable. Her and Starmer are well out in front.
Yeah, they are. Everybody knows we're getting poorer. Everybody can feel it. We've been feeling it for a long time. And all the government can say is the country's richer. Well, the country might be richer, but we've imported 15 million people over the last 20 years. So the country is richer. We've got 15 million people extra here. But when you divide the wealth up per person, what you were talking about, we're getting less money because there's more people in the country. So we're getting less, we're earning less, and we're being taxed at the most since the Second World War. So we're having more and more money stolen off us. And it's not even like the services we're getting for having our money stolen are class A. And at least we've got good services, you know. Nothing's working. Police don't work. The civil service doesn't work. The councils don't work. The NHS is crumbling. And it's like, well, what are we paying all this? What are we getting for anything we pay and we give the government? We don't seem to be getting anything. And in 3 weeks' time, is it 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we've got the local elections. And surely Labour is going to get the spanking of a lifetime.
Well, that's why a lot of the areas that cancelled their elections were Labour councils. Of course, they allowed a lot of these Labour. Labour don't have any. I don't think Labour have any county councils controlled. They might have one. They might control one county council, but obviously they have county councillors in different areas. But I think a lot of them were actually areas where Labour tend to do okay, that they allowed the elections to be cancelled. Goes to show again, this was never to do with rearranging borders and stuff like that. This was always about trying to preserve a few county councillors that are left. But yes, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath, and I think it'll be a bloodbath for the Tories as well, who are the only thing worse than being talked about is, of course, not being talked about. And what people are talking about now, including myself, I'm sure you can vouch for this. I'm talking about Labour a hell of a lot. I'm talking about Reform a hell of a lot. I'm laughing at Ed Davey quite a lot. I barely mention the Tories ever, you know.
And if you do mention the Tories, the name will be Robert Jenrick.
Yeah, you know, the polling for, I don't want to, if we segue, I don't know. I don't, you know, a picture was shown to so many voters in polling of Kemi Badenoch, and I think only 1% could say who she was. You know, this is bad stuff. Whereas the complete opposite was true with Farage. 99% of people who saw him knew who he was.
Can I jump in? The picture was shown in Poland, did you say?
No, in polling.
Oh, polling. Right, sorry. right. So I was saying, well, who cares in Poland? But polling, okay, right.
Yeah, polling, yeah. See, yeah. Farage is by far the most well-known person. People now know who Starmer is, of course, because he's the Prime Minister. Nobody knows who Kemi Badenoch is. And if the Tories are going to get a walloping. Like, the Tories control Lancashire County Council and have done for quite a while now. I've got no real issue with them. But it doesn't matter, because these elections are going to be a chance for people to show their disdain for probably the last Tory government still, to an extent, and the fact that they're almost irrelevance now, but also show their disdain for this Labour government, which is now more unpopular than the Tory government after 14 years within just 10 months. So I think Reform are pushing at an open door in a lot of areas. Tragically, and Ed Davey will take this as a good thing because he just looks like a knob all the time, but he'll pick up a few seats as well, because people are going to say, well, what else am I going to vote for? And the Greens will probably pick up a few county councillors as well, I imagine. Not many, maybe a handful for the Greens. But I think the Lib Dems and Reform are going to do pretty well. The left-wing vote will go to... the left-wing vote will go to the Lib Dems, and the right-wing vote will go to Reform. But if you look at the polling, it shows that Labour were on 39% for these local elections. They've dropped to 12 points to just 27. Reform are now on 30%. They were on 18%. So Reform have picked up, not just Tory voters, they've picked up that 12% that Labour have dropped. And those people are now intending to vote Reform in those local elections. And don't forget, people are far more likely to vote for another party in the local elections than they would in the general, because purely for the reason that people see council elections as a bit of a joke anyway. And the vast majority of people in this country, it's just facts whether you like it or not, don't even know who their councillors are. They just vote for the party that they see.
Yeah, I think the Greens will do better than they normally do because of the Muslim vote. Quite a lot of the Muslim vote now is going to the Greens, for the Greens are all about free Palestine. The Lib Dems will do better than normal, but they could have done so much more if they had a decent leader. Ed Davey isn't a leader of a political party. He's a comedian. That's an insult to comedians. He's not even funny. He's a clown. You saw him the other day running around and this and that, and he's a clown. And there's many disaffected Labour voters and some Tory voters who would go to the Lib Dems if they're a more serious party, but they're not. But they'll still do better than normal because Labour and the Tories are still hated.
It's just a protest vote, isn't it? That's all it is. It's just a protest vote. And like I said, people are far more likely to protest vote in a local election than they are in a general election. Although, since Boris won the majority in 2019, people are far less tribal as well. So whereas in the past, these parties, whether it be Tory or Labour or certain areas of Lib Dems, could rely on a certain number of the electorate in each constituency voting for them, they can't do that anymore now. Boris broke that mould with that 2019 general election. And those people that were willing to say what they used to call the Red Wall, some of the seats in the Midlands and the North, those people that had always voted Labour their entire lives, changed their vote once, and they're far more willing to do it for a second time. Yes, Labour recaptured quite a few of those seats, but if you look at those seats, I'm talking constituencies now, not local elections, the vote share actually went down. The only reason Labour won these seats back from the Conservative Party was because the Tory vote collapsed in such a major way. And not just that, of course, also the fact that Reform were there splitting the vote as well. So there's a lot to play for in these elections, and I'll be very, very surprised if Labour come out with any sort of credibility whatsoever. But Starmer can spin that. He can say, well, we didn't have many county councillors to start with, and we expected to maybe, keep it around the same or lose a few. What's going to be worse is Kemi, because the Tories have got a hell of a lot. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head now, but the Tories have got a hell of a lot of county councillors because people know that the Tories run local services better than Labour. That's just fact. But she's got a lot more to lose than anybody else. But even if she gets ousted, Nick, I'm not even sure that Jenrick can win a leadership contest. The party's full of wets, and I'm not sure there's enough MPs there to vote for Jenrick to be leader.
Who knows? But I think what will be interested at local elections will be the percentage share. We know that Labour haven't got many seats, and we expect Tories to do badly, and we expect Reform to do well. I want to see the percentages. I want to see the drop in the Labour vote, the drop in the Tory vote. I want to see what those percentages are, and I want to see what is the increase in the Reform vote, because that will then tell us, are Reform really making an impact? Have the people forgiven the Tories because Labour's so bad? And is there any support out there for Labour? Is the election the 2nd of May, 4th of May?
1st of May, isn't it?
1st of May. Right. What you doing the 2nd of May? Let's jump on a Zoom call and let's do one of these if you're around on the 2nd of May, and let's see what stats are out on what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'll be a Friday, won't it? I think.
Yeah. Be a Friday.
We can't forget as well, we've got a very important by-election that people aren't talking about because the local elections are actually taking precedent. We've got the Runcorn and Helsbury by-election coming up, and Labour, despite having a 14,000 majority, I think it was, in that seat, that Reform are now odds on 3-10. So they're basically 3 1/3 on, which is massive. Labour have dropped to 5-2. I'd be very surprised if Reform didn't take this seat.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the hierarchy of Reform, I'd be saying this is all out. We need Runcorn. We need to win this by-election. It's a perfect area, perfect scenario. The Labour MP got kicked out because he punched one of his constituencies and knocked him on the floor and carried on punching him. He's a convicted criminal now. It's like everything. The National Party is doing terrible. Everyone hates Labour. It's if Reform can't win this, then I'd be extremely upset if I was at the top of Reform going, we need to do better than this.
Oh, it'd be a major disaster. Like as you sort of just said, the stars couldn't have aligned any better for them. The Lib Dems haven't got a prayer in Runcorn. The Tories haven't got a prayer and they're irrelevant. Labour have fallen to pieces. Their MPs just knocked somebody out. It couldn't be any better for Reform. And if they can't take this, I mean, the bookies are really wrong. If they're 3-1 on, it's pretty likely they're going to. But if they can't take this seat under these circumstances, then that's a major disaster. That would be huge. But I can't see it happening. I'm to be fair, hands up. I hope they win it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they win. We need change, and that's a fortnight away. That by-election. So get that in your diary. The 2nd of May, we're going to get together and we'll analyse what's going on. Ash, as always, cheers for coming along. I can't wait now. I got 2 weeks to wait. I want to know what goes on.
Sad, aren't we?
we are political nerds, me and you. Ash, have a great Easter bank holiday, and I'll catch up with you soon.
And you. Thanks, Nick. Speak to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.